Nora's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. That laugh, low, easy, familiar, belonged to a ghost. She'd agreed to this blind date to prove she'd moved on. But the man sitting across from her, smiling like they were strangers, was Ethan Clarke. The same Ethan who'd stood silent 15 years ago while his friends read her love letter aloud to the entire 8th grade. The same Ethan whose indifference had taught her she wasn't worth defending. He didn't recognize her yet. She could leave, walk out, delete the app, pretend this never happened. Or she could stay and see if the boy who'd watched her break had grown into someone worth knowing. Ethan was still smiling, waiting for her answer to a question she hadn't heard. The rain had been falling since morning, turning Portland's streets into rivers of reflected neon and fallen leaves. Nora arrived at Coava Coffee Roasters 15 minutes early because that's what anxious people did. Showed up, claimed territory, controlled variables. She ordered a pour-over she didn't want and claimed a table by the window where the glass fogged with condensation, blurring the street outside into impressionist streaks of gray and amber. Her phone buzzed. Mara's text. He's 6 feet 1 inch, dark hair, probably wearing that blue jacket I mentioned. Be nice. Nora had promised to be nice. She'd promised to give this a real chance, not the half-hearted swipe right and ghost routine she'd perfected over the past 2 years. 28 and perpetually single wasn't a personality trait, Mara had said over wine 3 weeks ago. It was a choice, a defense mechanism, a way of staying safe that had calcified into loneliness. The cafe smelled like burnt sugar and espresso, warm against the October chill seeping through the windows. Around her, other people existed in their own bubbles. A woman typing furiously on a laptop, 2 men debating something with intense hand gestures, a barista calling out drink orders in a rhythmic cadence. Normal people doing normal things. Nora pressed her thumb against the rim of her cup, grounding herself in the heat. The door chimed. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet pavement. A man shook rain from his shoulders, scanning the cafe with the careful attention of someone looking for a stranger's face. Tall, dark hair slightly too long, curling at the collar. Blue jacket exactly as Mara had described. He caught her eye and smiled. Uncertain, hopeful, the kind of smile that asked a question. Handsome. The thought arrived unwelcome, but undeniable. Strong jaw, kind eyes, the build of someone who spent time outdoors. This might actually work. He crossed to her table, navigating between chairs with an athlete's awareness of space. Extended a hand. Nora, I'm Ethan. His palm was warm against hers, grip firm without being aggressive. She shook it, trying to remember Mara's coaching. Eye contact, smile, open body language. Don't mention your ex-boyfriend or the restraining order or anything remotely resembling emotional baggage on the first date. Hi, thanks for braving the weather. I'm from Portland. If I stayed inside every time it rained, I'd never leave the house. He settled into the chair across from her, movements easy and confident. Not cocky, just comfortable in his own skin in a way Nora had never quite mastered. Mara showed me your design portfolio. That rebrand for the bookstore was incredible. Heat crept up her neck. You looked me up? She sent it. I looked. Big difference. His smile widened, crinkling the corners of his eyes. I'm not creepy, I promise. Just thorough. Occupational hazard. Nurses are big on research before diving in. The joke landed gentle, self-deprecating. Nora felt herself relax fractionally, the tight band around her chest loosening. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe Mara had actually... And then he laughed. Low, easy, familiar. The sounds sliced through 15 years like they were tissue paper. Nora's hand froze on her coffee cup, ceramic suddenly too hot against her palm. That laugh, she knew that laugh, had heard it echo through nightmares and therapy sessions, and the occasional intrusive thought that ambushed her in grocery store lines. That laugh didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to a ghost named Ethan Clarke. Her mind raced through possibilities, grasping for rational explanations. Different Ethan, common name, there were probably dozens in Portland alone. The city pretended to be big, but functioned like a small town, 6 degrees of separation collapsing into 2 or 3. Overlaps happened. Coincidences existed. People had doppelgangers. But his face, now that she was looking, really looking, cataloging features with the precision of someone searching for proof, the angles were familiar beneath the man he'd become. Sharper jaw, yes. Broader shoulders. The gangly teenage frame filled out into something solid. But the same slight asymmetry to his smile, left side lifting a fraction higher than the right. The same way his eyebrows drew together when he concentrated, a small vertical line appearing between them. The barista called out his order. "Ethan, Americano, room for cream." He excused himself to grab his drink, and Nora's thoughts spiraled faster. Lincoln High. They'd gone to Lincoln High together, graduated the same year, 2015, caps thrown into rainy June air. They'd walked the same halls, sat through the same terrible pep rallies where the basketball team got standing ovations and everyone else got forgotten. She'd been Nora Morrison then, quiet, invisible mostly, which had been a survival strategy and a personality trait she couldn't quite separate. Until 8th grade, when invisibility had become impossible. When a folded piece of notebook paper had made her the most visible person in a cafeteria full of witnesses. Ethan returned, doctoring his coffee with precise measurements. 2 cream packets, 1 sugar, stirred exactly 12 times. As he worked, his fingers tapped against the table. 3 quick beats, pause, 3 more. An old rhythm, a nervous tell. Tyler Moss used to mimic that exact pattern during study hall, mocking Ethan for it in front of anyone who'd laugh. Morse code for, "I'm boring." Ethan had tried to stop doing it, Nora remembered suddenly, had trained himself out of the habit for months. But here it was, 15 years later, resurfacing under the mild pressure of a first date. The memory arrived sharp and unbidden, dragging others with it. Ethan had been in Tyler's orbit back then. Not the ringleader, never the one leading the charge, but close enough to benefit from proximity. Close enough that his silence counted as agreement. Close enough to laugh at the jokes, even when he clearly didn't find them funny. Close enough to stand there and do nothing when it mattered most. "So Mara says you grew up here." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Decades of practice at hiding internal chaos paying off in a way her therapist would probably call maladaptive. "Born and raised. Went to Lincoln High, actually." He took a sip of coffee, casual, like the name of that school didn't make Nora's stomach drop 6 inches. "You?" The lie came smooth as silk, rehearsed in the 30 seconds she'd had to prepare. "I moved here for college, art school." "PNCA?" He looked genuinely interested, leaning forward slightly. "Yeah, not technically a lie. She had gone to Pacific Northwest College of Art, had spent 4 years learning to transform pain into color theory and negative space. She just conveniently left out the part where she'd grown up 20 minutes away in a house she'd sold the day after her father's funeral. Left out the shared middle school, the cafeteria with its terrible acoustics, the letter that had defined her understanding of vulnerability for the next decade and a half. Ethan nodded, apparently satisfied, no flicker of recognition crossing his features. "What made you stay after graduation? Most people I know left Portland for bigger markets." The rain, another easy deflection, delivered with a small smile she didn't feel. "And the coffee. Can't get a decent pour-over in most places. New York has the attitude, but not the beans." He smiled at that, the genuine kind that reached his eyes. "See, I knew we'd get along." The "we" settled between them like a third presence at the table, premature, presumptuous, already assigning them to some shared future. But his eyes were kind, hopeful in a way that made her chest ache with something complicated and unwelcome, because she remembered those eyes from a different context, remembered them watching, passive and safe in their passivity, as Tyler Moss held up her letter like a trophy. Dear Ethan, I know this is stupid, but I think you're... She shoved the memory down with practiced force, focused on the present. The man across from her wasn't 13 anymore. The cafeteria was 15 years and a lifetime ago. Neither of them was the same person, except maybe they were. Mara mentioned you work at OHSU? Nora asked, grasping for safer ground. Pediatric unit. I'm a nurse. He leaned back, hands wrapped around his mug. Lots of scared kids, lots of worried parents. It's hard, but it's good. That's really kind of you. Not really. I'm good at it, and they need someone who's good at it. That's all. The humility felt genuine. She wanted to believe it was genuine. She wanted to believe he was someone worth knowing. The letter had been folded into a tiny square, hidden in the spiral binding of her science notebook. Nora Morrison, age 13, had rewritten it 7 times before her handwriting stopped shaking enough to be legible. Dear Ethan, I know this is stupid, but I think you're really smart and funny. Would you want to go to the winter dance with me? Nora. She'd left it in his locker during passing period, slipped it through the vent, heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear. By lunch, Tyler Moss had it. The cafeteria at Lincoln Middle School had terrible acoustics. Every sound echoed, magnified. Laughter bounced off linoleum and fluorescent lights. 200 students crammed into a space designed for half that, and every single one of them turned to watch as Tyler stood on a table, Nora's letter held high. Listen up. Nora Morrison thinks Ethan Clarke is smart and funny. Tyler's voice dripped with exaggerated sweetness. She wants to know if he'll go to the dance with her. The laughter started as a ripple, became a wave. Nora sat frozen at her usual table in the corner, her tray of barely touched lunch in front of her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only watch as Tyler performed for his audience, reading her words with theatrical flair. Ethan Clarke stood with his group near the vending machines. Tall for 13, basketball player, part of the circle that mattered. He wasn't laughing, not exactly, but he wasn't stopping it either. Their eyes met across the cafeteria. His expression was complicated. Embarrassed, maybe, uncomfortable. But he didn't say anything, didn't tell Tyler to stop, just looked away and let it happen. That look, pity mixed with relief that he wasn't the one being humiliated, hurt worse than the laughter. Later, after school, Nora's mom asked why she was crying. Nora said she had a stomach ache. It wasn't entirely a lie. Shame had physical weight. It lived in your gut and made you nauseous. She never wrote another letter. Nora excused herself to the bathroom, legs unsteady as she navigated through the cafe's narrow hallway. The walls were decorated with local art, abstract paintings in muted tones, photographs of Portland bridges in fog. She registered none of it. Her peripheral vision had collapsed to a tunnel. Inside the single-stall bathroom, she locked the door and gripped the edge of the sink. The porcelain was cold against her palms. She counted breaths, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The technique her therapist had taught her for panic attacks. This wasn't quite panic, but it was close enough that the muscle memory kicked in. The mirror reflected someone she barely recognized in moments like these. 28-year-old Nora looked nothing like the girl in that cafeteria. She'd changed her last name after college, legally, cleanly, standing in line at the courthouse for 3 hours with the proper documentation. Morrison became Bennett. Her father's name, shed like dead skin, replaced with her mother's maiden name, the one that belonged to the woman who'd held her while she cried over a letter. She dyed her hair darker, from mousy brown to near black, with subtle burgundy undertones. Traded thick-framed glasses for contacts that made her eyes look larger, more defined. Learned to walk into rooms without apologizing for taking up space, without making herself small, and forgettable. The girl with the unfortunate letter had become a woman with a design portfolio that agencies competed for. A woman with a decent apartment in the Pearl District and a life that worked on her terms. A woman who'd been in therapy long enough to understand that survival could look like success. Ethan Clarke didn't recognize her because she'd become someone unrecognizable. "You can leave," the voice in her head whispered. The rational voice, the one that sounded like her therapist during their Thursday sessions. "Walk out. Block his number. Mara will understand eventually." But would she? Mara, who'd spent 3 months convincing Nora to try dating again, who'd vetted Ethan personally, declared him genuinely good people after working alongside him for 3 years. Mara, who thought they were perfect for each other because they both liked Ethiopian coffee and independent bookstores and didn't talk over people in group conversations. Mara, who transferred to Lincoln halfway through sophomore year and knew nothing about 8th grade cafeterias or letters read aloud, or the specific way humiliation could calcify into permanent scar tissue. Nora studied her face in the mirror, red lipstick slightly smudged at the corner, mascara still intact, no raccoon eyes despite the adrenaline, the external armor holding. She looked like someone on a successful first date, someone normal. She reapplied the lipstick with hands that only shook slightly. She could do this. Sit through another hour of coffee with a man who didn't remember breaking something fundamental inside her. Smile. Nod. Make polite conversation about hospital rebranding and the relative merits of pour-over versus French press. Then never see him again. Clean break. No explanation necessary. Or she could stay. Figure out who he'd become in 15 years. See if time and experience had changed him into someone capable of real decency. Or if the thoughtful gestures were just better camouflage for the same indifference. The bathroom door handle rattled. Someone else needing the space. Nora checked her reflection one last time. The mask was secure. She unlocked the door and stepped aside for a woman with a stroller. Decision made by default and cowardice in equal measure. When she returned to the table, Ethan had ordered her a refill. Same pour-over, same roast from Guatemala, with notes of dark chocolate and cherry. He'd remembered her drink order after one mention, paid attention to a detail she'd offered casually while deciding. Small thing, thoughtful thing, the kind of thing that made this so much harder. "You okay?" he asked as she sat. "Yeah, sorry, just needed a minute." No apology necessary. He pushed the fresh cup toward her. "I added a splash of the honey syrup. You mentioned liking it earlier and I thought—" He stopped himself. "Sorry, that's presumptuous." It was presumptuous. It was also thoughtful in a way that made her chest tighten. This was the problem. The boy who'd stood silent didn't reconcile with the man who remembered honey syrup. "Thank you," she said quietly. His smile was relieved. "So tell me about your worst client experience. I need to know if designers suffer as much as healthcare workers." And just like that, they were talking again. Easy, natural. Like he wasn't the reason she'd learned to be afraid of vulnerability. "You okay?" he asked as she sat, voice carrying genuine concern rather than polite inquiry. "Yeah, sorry, just needed a minute." No apology necessary. He pushed the fresh cup toward her, condensation already beating on the ceramic. "I added a splash of the honey syrup. You mentioned liking it earlier and I thought—" He stopped himself, awareness crossing his features. "Sorry, that's presumptuous. I should have asked first." It was presumptuous. It was also thoughtful in a way that made her chest tighten with something she refused to name. The boy who'd stood silent 15 years ago didn't reconcile with the man who remembered honey syrup and worried about overstepping boundaries. "Thank you," she said quietly, wrapping her hands around the cup. His smile was relieved, shoulders dropping fractionally. "So tell me about your worst client experience. I need to know if designers suffer as much as healthcare workers." And just like that, they were talking again. The conversation found its rhythm, easy, natural, the kind of flow that usually took weeks to develop. Nora told him about the tech startup that had wanted Spotify meets NASA meets my grandmother's kitchen, and couldn't understand why those aesthetics didn't mesh. Ethan countered with the story of a hospital administrator who'd insisted the pediatric wing should look more professional and suggested removing all the colorful murals. "What did you do?" Nora asked, genuinely curious now despite herself. "Brought in a child psychologist to explain why sterile environments increase anxiety in kids. Sometimes you have to fight bureaucracy with credentials." He grinned. "The murals stayed. We even added more." They talked for another hour, maybe longer. Time did that thing it does when conversation flows, collapsed and expanded simultaneously, minutes stretching into comfortable pauses and condensing into rapid exchanges. Ethan told her about the hospital's rebranding project. Outdated logo that looked like it belonged in a 1990s clip art folder, messaging that confused patients, a committee that couldn't agree whether teal or navy blue felt more trustworthy. He sketched the current design on a napkin with a pen borrowed from the barista, pointing out its failures with surprising insight for someone outside the industry. "See, the font is trying to be modern and trustworthy at the same time, but it just looks corporate, cold. And for a pediatric wing, that's the opposite of what we need. Kids don't trust sterile, they trust warm." Nora found herself leaning forward, designer brain engaging, despite the emotional chaos underneath. "You want approachable, warm but still professional, maybe hand-drawn elements to soften the institutional feel without making it look unprofessional?" "Exactly." His eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone finally being understood. "That's what I've been trying to tell the committee, but I'm just a nurse. What do I know about branding? You know your audience. That's 90% of good design." She pulled the napkin closer, studying his rough sketch. "The other 10% is having someone who can execute the vision without losing what makes it work." He studied her with open appreciation. Not the male gaze kind that made her skin crawl at networking events. Something else. Respect, maybe. Recognition of competence. "Would you ever consider consulting on it? I mean, I know you're probably busy with your actual clients, but I'd have to see the full brief first." The words came out before she could stop them, professional instinct overriding emotional caution. "Of course, I can email it tomorrow, if you're interested." She was interested, professionally at least. The challenge appealed to her. Pediatric branding required a specific touch, playful without being condescending, comforting without being saccharine, medical without being scary. It was exactly the kind of problem she liked solving. And maybe, a small, traitorous part of her thought, working together would give her answers. Let her figure out who Ethan Clarke actually was beneath the surface pleasantries and thoughtful gestures. Whether the anti-bullying posts on LinkedIn were performance or genuine transformation. "Email it," she said, committing before she could reconsider. "I'll take a look." His smile could have powered the cafe's lights. "Thank you, seriously, the kids deserve better than the current disaster. You really care about them. They're scared and in pain and trying to be brave about things no kid should have to be brave about. Someone should care." The sincerity in his voice was unguarded, vulnerable in a way that caught her completely off guard. This wasn't performance, this was belief, and that made everything so much more complicated. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the windows in sheets that blurred the street into watercolor. The cafe had filled around them without Nora noticing. Couples on laptops sharing a single pair of headphones, students with textbooks and highlighters, the afternoon crowd seeking shelter from October's relentless gray. Nora glanced at her phone. 2 hours had passed. 2 hours of talking to Ethan Clarke, and she hadn't once wanted to leave. That realization felt dangerous. "I should probably go," she said, though she didn't move, didn't reach for her bag or push back her chair. "Yeah, me too." He didn't move either, just sat there with his empty cup and that napkin sketch between them. They existed in the waited pause, the kind that happens when neither person wants to be the first to break whatever fragile thing has formed. Nora could feel the question forming in the air between them. Can we do this again? And she didn't know what her answer would be. Finally, Ethan stood, gathered their empty cups to bust them. Can I walk you to your car? Old-fashioned, courteous, the kind of gesture that would have made 13-year-old Nora swoon. 28-year-old Nora hesitated, then nodded. They were halfway to the door when it chimed open, admitting a burst of cold air and Mara's unmistakable energy. "Oh my God, you're both still here!" Mara's delight was aggressive and immediate, the kind that filled a room and demanded participation. She swept Nora into a hug that smelled like jasmine perfume and hospital-grade hand sanitizer, whispering directly into her ear, "He's perfect, right? I knew it. I'm a genius." Ethan greeted Mara with easy familiarity, standing to give her a one-armed hug while balancing the empty cups. They'd been colleagues for 3 years, apparently, worked different floors but crossed paths during code blues and staff meetings. Mara had been trying to set him up with literally anyone decent for the past 6 months. "You're too picky," Mara said to Ethan, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. "Last month, you said no to Sarah from radiology because she didn't like Thai food. She said cilantro tastes like soap. That's a fundamental incompatibility. It's a genetic thing, you snob." They bickered with the comfort of real friendship, and Nora found herself cataloging this new data point. Mara's judgment of character was usually solid. 3 years of working alongside someone revealed their true nature, whether they were kind when it didn't benefit them, whether they showed up when it was inconvenient. But Mara hadn't known 8th grade Ethan, hadn't seen him stand there in the cafeteria. "I was just grabbing coffee before my shift," Mara said, though her shift didn't start for another 4 hours, and she was already holding a to-go cup from a different cafe. The setup was transparent, sweet, completely Mara. "But this is so great. How's it going?" "Good," Ethan said. "Really good," Nora added, and meant it despite everything churning underneath. Mara's grin could have split her face. She bounced slightly on her toes, the way she did when excited. "Okay, so I know this is forward, but my engagement party is next Saturday. Small thing, just close friends at our loft. You should both come. Together." Nora opened her mouth to deflect, to manufacture a prior commitment, but Ethan spoke first. "I'm already on the list." "I know, but now you can bring Nora as your date instead of showing up alone and drinking too much wine in the corner." "I don't drink too much wine at parties." "You absolutely do. Last month, you and Dr. Chen got into a debate about healthcare policy that ended with both of you crying. Those were passionate tears." Mara turned to Nora, expression shifting to genuine pleading. "Please come. I need someone to help me wrangle the DIY centerpiece situation, and Ethan needs adult supervision." It was a trap, a well-meaning, perfectly executed trap. Refusing would require explanation, would reveal that this date, however pleasant, however unexpectedly natural, was supposed to be singular, contained, not the beginning of something. But Mara's eyes were so hopeful, and Ethan was watching with that careful expression he'd worn all afternoon, like he was trying not to want something too much. "Sure," Nora heard herself say. "I'd love to." Mara squealed, actual squealing, the kind that made nearby customers look up. "This is perfect. You guys are perfect. I'm a genius and everyone should listen to me about everything from now on." After Mara left, still radiating matchmaker satisfaction and texting frantically, Ethan turned to Nora. "You don't have to come if you don't want to. I can tell her you're busy, prior commitment, whatever." The out was there, clean, easy. "No, it's fine, I want to." The lie felt smoother this time, almost convincing. Good. His relief was palpable, visible in the way his shoulders relaxed. "It'll be nice. Mara throws excellent parties. Loud, but excellent." They stepped outside into the rain. Ethan had parked 2 blocks away. Nora's car was closer, tucked in the lot behind the cafe. He walked her there anyway, coat collar turned up against the drizzle. The parking lot was nearly empty, puddles reflecting the gray sky and the neon sign from the Vietnamese restaurant next door. Nora's car, a beat-up Honda Civic she'd named Florence after Florence Welch, because both were temperamental and dramatic, sat beneath a struggling oak tree that dropped wet leaves onto the windshield. The rain had softened to mist, the kind that didn't look like much but soaked through clothes within minutes. Ethan walked close enough that their shoulders almost brushed, close enough to share the small umbrella of dry air beneath the building's overhang. Nora unlocked her door with the key fob. The car chirped cheerfully, headlights blinking. Then, in a gesture that felt plucked from a different era, from black and white movies and her grandmother's courtship stories, Ethan reached past her and opened the door. "Thank you," she said, suddenly awkward in a way she hadn't been inside the cafe. Out here in the intimate quiet of the parking lot, everything felt different, heavier. "I had a really good time today." His voice was quiet, earnest in that unguarded way that kept catching her off balance. "I know blind dates are supposed to be terrible, like, statistically, they should be disasters. But this didn't feel like that." "No," she agreed, because lying about this one small truth felt unnecessary. It didn't. They stood too close in the rain, close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes, could count the small freckles scattered across his nose, faded now but visible if you looked. Close enough to notice the small scar above his left eyebrow, thin and white, probably from childhood. Close enough to see that he was nervous. The slight tension in his jaw. The way his hands had found his pockets, like he didn't trust what they'd do otherwise. He smelled like coffee and something clean, cedar maybe, or rain, or the combination of both. Something that made her want to lean closer, even as every instinct screamed to maintain distance. "I'll email you about the hospital project," he said. "Tomorrow, if that's okay." "Okay. And I'll see you Saturday, at Mara's?" Saturday. The word came out softer than intended. He smiled, stepped back, giving her space to slide into the driver's seat. The moment broke, atmosphere shifting back to something manageable. She should tell him, right now. Rip off the bandage before this went any further, before the lie of omission became something worse. "Hey, funny thing, we actually went to school together. Remember that letter? The cafeteria? The girl you didn't defend?" The words formed in her throat, heavy and immovable, stuck somewhere between intention and action. But what would happen if she said them? Would he remember? Would he apologize with the same sincerity he'd shown talking about pediatric patients? Would the apology matter after 15 years? Or would it just be empty words trying to smooth over something that had calcified into permanent scar tissue? And what if he didn't remember at all? What if that moment that had defined her understanding of vulnerability for the next decade and a half had been completely forgettable for him? Just another day in 8th grade, unremarkable, easily lost among 1,000 other cafeteria lunches. She didn't know which option would hurt more. Instead, she said, "Drive safe. You too." He waited until she'd started the engine before heading toward his own car, collar still turned up against the mist. She pulled out of the lot slowly, watching him in the rearview mirror until he turned the corner and disappeared into the gray afternoon. Her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The radio was playing something soft and melancholic. Phoebe Bridgers, probably, or one of those indie artists who understood that sadness had texture. Nora turned it off, drove in silence back to her apartment, mind racing faster than the windshield wipers. Nora didn't go home. She drove to her studio instead, a shared workspace in the Pearl District that she rented with 2 other designers and a photographer who only showed up on Tuesdays. At 6 p.m. on a Saturday, the space was empty, silent except for the hum of old radiators and the distant sound of traffic on Burnside. She could think here, process, figure out what the hell she was doing. Her laptop booted up slowly, the rainbow wheel spinning while she made coffee she didn't want from the communal Keurig. Gave her time to reconsider, to tell herself this was invasive, unnecessary, borderline creepy. That it didn't matter who Ethan had been at 13, that people changed, that she should let the past stay buried. But she searched anyway. LinkedIn appeared first in the results. Ethan Clarke, pediatric nurse at Oregon Health and Science University, bachelor's degree from Oregon Health Sciences, volunteer coordinator for Camp Sunshine, a retreat for kids with serious illnesses, member of the Portland Anti-Bullying Coalition since 2019. His profile picture showed him with a group of children at what looked like summer camp, all wearing tie-dye shirts and grinning at the camera. His smile was unguarded, genuine in a way that made her chest ache. She scrolled down through his posts, shared articles about childhood trauma and its effects on long-term health, a fundraiser he'd organized for art therapy programs at the hospital. It had raised $40,000. Photos from a 5K run supporting mental health services for teens. He wasn't performing goodness for an audience. This was consistent, sustained, the kind of pattern that only came from genuine belief. But that didn't erase the past, didn't unring the bell. She opened Facebook next, even though she knew she shouldn't. Even though digital archaeology of ex-almost boyfriends and blind dates was a violation of some unspoken rule. His privacy settings were loose, photos public, tagged posts visible, the kind of casual lack of concern that came from not having anything to hide. She scrolled back, past recent pictures of hiking trails and hospital fundraisers, past photos from his 20s, college parties, road trips, the usual documenting of youth. Back further, until she found them. Lincoln High, class of 2015, 10-year reunion. The album was from 5 years ago. Nora clicked through slowly, heart hammering. There he was, older but recognizable, standing with a group of men in the beer garden of some Pearl District bar. And there, tagged in the same album, wearing the same cocky smile he'd had at 13, was Tyler Moss. The caption under one photo read, "The boys back together, some things never change." Ethan's arms slung around Tyler's shoulders, both laughing at something off camera, easy, familiar. The body language of real friendship, not obligation. Nora's stomach turned. She kept scrolling, found more evidence like collecting stones for her pockets. A camping trip from 3 years ago. Ethan, Tyler, and 2 other guys from their old friend group, all holding beers around a campfire. Tyler's bachelor party 2 years ago. Ethan in the background, clearly mid-speech, probably giving a best man toast. Tyler's wedding last year. Ethan in the groomsmen lineup, 4th from the left, wearing a gray suit and holding a bouquet. They were still friends, after everything. After the cafeteria and the letter, and the way Tyler had taught an entire 8th grade that Nora Morrison was someone to mock. Ethan Clarke, pediatric nurse and anti-bullying advocate, was still best friends with the boy who'd bullied her. The hypocrisy burned like acid in her throat. She wanted to be rational about this, wanted to remember that people were complicated, that friendships formed in childhood had their own gravity, that maybe Ethan had confronted Tyler about it years ago, and Tyler had changed too. But the photos didn't show regret, they showed celebration. Nora closed her laptop, stared at her reflection in the dark screen, distorted, ghostly, until the image blurred. She could block his number, delete his email before he sent the hospital brief, never go to Mara's party, never see him again. It would be clean, final. Or she could go to that engagement party, look him in the eye when he finally recognized her, watch his face change when he realized what he'd done, or failed to do. Watch him squirm when confronted with the gap between his anti-bullying advocacy and his choice of best friends. She could make him remember. Her phone buzzed against the desk, loud in the quiet studio. A text from an unknown number that could only be one person. Hey, it's Ethan. Mara gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say again that I had a great time today. Looking forward to Saturday. Nora stared at the message for a long time. At the casual friendliness of it, the hope embedded in every word. Then she saved his contact. Didn't delete it. Didn't block it. She typed back, each letter a small act of decision. Me too. See you Saturday. And hit send before she could change her mind. Outside the studio windows, Portland settled into its evening rhythm. Headlights streaking through rain, the city breathing in its own particular fog. Nora sat in the dark, phone still in her hand, and wondered which version of herself would show up to that party. The one who'd learned to protect herself, or the one who still, despite everything, wanted to believe people could change. Nora almost didn't come. She'd tried on 4 different outfits, each one a different version of herself. The confident designer in black jeans and a silk blouse, the casual friend in a sweater dress, the woman who didn't care in vintage denim. She'd settled on something in between, dark green dress that made her eyes look brighter, leather jacket for armor, boots she could run in if necessary. The thought wasn't entirely metaphorical. Mara's loft occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting warm pools of light across clusters of people holding wine glasses and craft beer bottles. The playlist was curated indie, the National, Bon Iver, artists who understood that parties needed soundtracks that didn't demand attention. Nora spotted Ethan immediately. He stood near the kitchen island, talking to a woman in scrubs who was gesturing emphatically about something. He was laughing, head tilted back, completely at ease in a way that made her chest tighten. He hadn't seen her yet. She could still leave. Claim a migraine via text. Mara would understand. Mara always understood. But then Ethan turned, scanning the room with that careful attention she remembered from the cafe. His eyes found hers across the crowded loft. His entire face changed, lit up with something that looked dangerously close to relief. He excused himself from the conversation and navigated through the crowd with purpose. "You came." He said it like he'd been half convinced she wouldn't. "I promised Mara I'd help with centerpieces." "Right, the centerpieces." His smile was soft, knowing. "How are you?" "Good, you?" "Better now." The honesty of it disarmed her. She'd prepared for small talk, for the careful dance of new relationships. Not this. Before she could respond, Mara appeared with the force of a small hurricane, dragging them both toward the balcony. "Okay, so I need your opinion on something crucial. The caterer brought the wrong appetizers, and I'm having a minor crisis about whether mini quiches are too bridal shower and not enough engagement party." Ethan caught Nora's eye over Mara's head. His expression said, "This is my life now." She found herself almost smiling back. The balcony was less crowded, just a handful of people braving the October chill for the view. The city sprawled below them, lights reflecting off the river in wavering streaks. Rain threatened but hadn't arrived yet, clouds hanging low and pregnant with it. Ethan appeared beside her with 2 drinks, whiskey ginger for him, the Moscow Mule she'd mentioned liking during their coffee date. He'd remembered. Again. "Mara's spiraling about quiches," he said, handing her the copper cup. "I told her nobody cares about appetizers as long as there's enough alcohol." Solid advice. "I'm very wise." He leaned against the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "So, week 1 of knowing me, how's it going?" The question was light, joking, but underneath she heard the real question. "Are you going to run?" "The hospital sent me the rebranding brief," she said instead of answering. "It's worse than you described." "Right? The font choice alone is a war crime." "I have thoughts, many thoughts." "Good thoughts?" "Expensive thoughts." She took a sip of her drink, the ginger and lime sharp on her tongue. "But fixable." They talked about the project for a while, safe ground, professional distance, but the conversation kept drifting into other territory. Books they'd both read, the best coffee shops in Portland, whether the city was better in summer or winter. Winter, Nora said. The rain makes everything softer, less sharp. Summer, Ethan countered, when you can actually see the sun and remember what vitamin D feels like. That's because you're a summer baby. The words came out automatic, unthinking, a fact she shouldn't know. Ethan's expression shifted, curiosity sharpening into something more focused. How did you know that? Her heart stuttered. You mentioned it? At the cafe? I don't think I did. He was studying her now, really looking. The same way he'd looked when asking if she'd always lived in Portland. When's your birthday? March. Spring baby, makes sense. But his eyes hadn't left her face, cataloging features with renewed attention. You know, there's something familiar about you. I keep trying to figure out where we might have crossed paths before Mara's setup. This was it, the moment to tell him, to rip off the bandage and watch his face change. Instead, Nora deflected. Portland's a small city. Probably saw each other at some hipster coffee shop. Maybe, but he didn't sound convinced. A group of people spilled onto the balcony, volume rising with laughter and overlapping conversations. The intimate moment broke. Ethan stepped back to make room, and Nora told herself she was relieved. An hour later, Mara corralled everyone for photos. The kind of obligatory group shots that would end up on Instagram with captions about chosen family and gratitude. Nora tried to position herself on the edge, but Mara had other plans. Nora, you're too far away. Get closer. Ethan, put your arm around her. You're both too stiff. Ethan's arm settled across her shoulders, warm and solid through the thin fabric of her dress. He smelled like cedar and whiskey, achingly familiar despite only knowing him for a week. This close, she could feel his heartbeat, or maybe that was her own, hammering loud enough for both of them. Smile, Mara commanded. Act like you like each other. We do like each other, Ethan said quietly, meant only for Nora. His thumb brushed against her shoulder. Accidental or intentional, she couldn't tell. The photographer counted down. Cameras flashed. Nora forced a smile that felt more real than it should. Then someone in the back shouted, Hey, any Lincoln High people here? We should get a reunion shot. Nora went rigid. 3 people raised their hands, laughing. A woman in a blazer, Stephanie something, debate team captain. A man with a beard, Marcus Chen, voted most likely to succeed. And standing near the kitchen, drink in hand, looking exactly like his Facebook photos, Tyler Moss. He'd grown a beard since the wedding photos, looked successful in that tech bro way, button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, expensive watch. But his smile was the same, cocky, self-assured in a way that came from never having to question his place in a room. Ethan's hand tensed on her shoulder. Oh, hey, Tyler's here. I didn't know he was coming. You know him. The question came out sharper than intended. Yeah, we go way back, middle school. Ethan's voice was warm with nostalgia, completely oblivious to the way Nora's entire body had gone taut. Tyler, get over here. Tyler wove through the crowd, grin widening when he spotted Ethan. They did that complicated handshake, hug thing men do, complete with backslapping. Man, I haven't seen you since the wedding, Tyler said. How's the hospital? Chaotic. Good chaotic. Ethan turned, already making introductions. Tyler, this is Nora. Nora, Tyler and I went to Lincoln together, Tyler finished, extending a hand toward Nora. Nice to meet you. His eyes slid over her, casual assessment, no recognition whatsoever. Why would there be? She'd been nobody to him, wallpaper, collateral damage in someone else's joke. Nora shook his hand. Her palm felt numb against his. Hi. How do you know Mara? Tyler asked, already losing interest, already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. We're friends. 2 words. All she could manage. Ethan was looking between them, sensing something off but not understanding what. Nora's a designer. She's helping with the hospital rebrand I mentioned. Cool, cool. Tyler was barely listening. Someone across the room caught his attention. Another Lincoln alum, probably. I should go say hi to Stephanie. Good seeing you, man. Nice meeting you, Nora. He left. Just walked away, carrying no weight from their shared past because for him, there was no weight to carry. Ethan turned back to Nora. You okay? You look pale. I need air. We're already outside. Different air. She extracted herself from his arm and walked back inside, needing distance, needing to breathe. Behind her, she heard Mara calling her name, but she kept walking toward the bathroom, the only place in this loft where she could lock a door. Nora avoided Ethan for 3 days, replied to his text with professional brevity about the hospital project, ignored his suggestions to meet for coffee and talk about the brief. She knew she was being obvious, knew he could sense the withdrawal. On Wednesday, she made the mistake of returning to Coava. She told herself it was because they had the best beans, told herself it was convenient to her morning meeting with a client, told herself she wasn't hoping to see him. All lies. He was there, same table by the window, laptop open, coffee steaming. He looked up when she walked in, face shifting through surprise to something that looked like relief and hurt in equal measure. Nora considered leaving, pretending she hadn't seen him, but he'd already closed his laptop, already stood, already committed to the interaction. Hi, he said when she reached the counter. Hi. Silence stretched between them, awkward in a way it had never been before. The barista took her order. Nora stared at the menu board like it contained crucial information. Can I join you? Ethan asked. Or are you meeting someone? I'm alone. Then can I please join you? I feel like I did something wrong, and I don't know what it was. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. She nodded. They sat at his table. Rain streaked down the window beside them, blurring the street into gray smears. Ethan wrapped his hands around his mug but didn't drink, just studied her with those careful eyes. What happened at the party? He asked quietly. You were fine, and then Tyler showed up, and then you weren't fine. I just needed air. Nora. Her name sounded different in his voice. Serious. Please don't do that. Don't give me polite non-answers. We barely know each other. You don't get to demand honesty. You're right, I don't. He leaned back, creating distance. But I want to know you. And I feel like every time we get close to something real, you pull back. Maybe I have reasons. Then tell me what they are. She wanted to. God, she wanted to just put it all on the table. The letter, the cafeteria, the way his silence had taught her she wasn't worth defending. But what would that accomplish? What good would it do to drag 15-year-old pain into the present? Tyler Moss, she said finally. You're friends with him. Since 7th grade. Why? He seems... She searched for words that wouldn't reveal too much. Confident. That's diplomatic. He can be kind of an asshole sometimes, honestly. But he's loyal, and he's changed a lot since high school. Has he? Ethan's brow furrowed. Do you know Tyler? We went to the same school. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ethan's expression shifted, confusion to realization to something that looked like dread. Lincoln, he said slowly. You went to Lincoln. For a while. What year did you graduate? 2015. His face went pale. Same as us. Nora watched him process it, watched the pieces fall into place. She could see the exact moment he started searching his memory for her face in yearbook photos, in crowded hallways, in the cafeteria. Morrison, he breathed. Your last name was Morrison. The coffee shop faded. There was only his face, horror and recognition dawning in equal measure. Nora Morrison, he said, voice barely above a whisper. The letter. There it was, the moment she'd been dreading and craving in equal measure. She met his eyes, held his gaze. Yeah, the letter. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe continued around them, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of other conversations, someone's laptop playing a podcast at low volume. Normal sounds in a moment that felt anything but. Ethan's hands had gone still on his coffee cup. His knuckles were white. I don't know what to say, he finally managed. You could start with why you're still friends with him. It's not... He stopped, started again. Tyler was a dick in middle school. I know that. We all were, in different ways. But people change. He's apologized for things. He does therapy. He volunteers at Big Brothers Big Sisters now. Does he remember what he did to me? The question landed like a stone. Ethan's silence was answer enough. Right, Nora said. Of course he doesn't. Why would he? I was nobody. That's not fair. Isn't it? He read my letter to the entire 8th grade, made me a joke for the rest of the year. And it was so unremarkable to him that he doesn't even remember. She laughed, but the sound was bitter. Meanwhile, I changed my name, went to therapy for years, learned to never be vulnerable again. But sure, tell me more about how he's changed. Ethan flinched. I'm sorry. I should have. Should have what? Stopped him? Yeah, you should have. The words came out harder than intended, sharpened by 15 years of wondering why he hadn't. But you didn't. You just stood there. I was 13 and terrified of losing my friends. And I was 13 and terrified of existing. The truth of it hung between them, undeniable and raw. Ethan looked like she'd slapped him. Maybe she had, verbally at least. I think about that day, he said quietly, more than you know. It's one of those memories that keeps coming back, usually at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. I see your face. I see myself standing there, doing nothing. And I hate that kid. I've spent 15 years trying to be better than that kid. Is that why you became a nurse? Chose pediatrics? Partly, he met her eyes. I wanted to be the person who shows up for scared kids. The person I wasn't for you. It was the right answer, the one her therapist would probably call genuine accountability. But it didn't fix anything, didn't unring the bell. I don't know what you want from me, Nora said. Do you want forgiveness? Absolution? Because I don't know if I can give you that. I want to understand why you didn't tell me, why you went on that date knowing who I was. Fair question, one she'd been avoiding asking herself. I wanted to see if you'd remember, she admitted, if that moment that defined my adolescence had meant anything to you at all. It did. It does. But not enough to recognize me. You're so different now. You changed your name, your look. I grew up, she interrupted. I had to. You got to just move on. The words hit their mark. Ethan looked stricken, and part of her was glad. The part that had been angry for 15 years. The part that wanted him to hurt the way she'd hurt. But another part, the part that had enjoyed their coffee dates, that had felt something real forming, hated seeing him hurt. She stood abruptly. I should go. Nora, please, can we just... I need time to process this, all of it. He didn't try to stop her, just watched as she gathered her things, as she walked out into the rain without an umbrella, as she chose cold and wet over staying in that warm cafe with him. Behind her, through the window, she could see him still sitting there, head in his hands. She told herself she didn't care. Despite everything, Nora couldn't quite bring herself to quit the hospital project. The brief was challenging in exactly the right ways, and the pediatric wing deserved better than Comic Sans and clip art. She told herself that was the only reason she showed up for the site visit Ethan had scheduled 2 weeks ago, before everything imploded. Professional. She could be professional. The hospital was exactly what she'd expected. Sterile hallways trying too hard to be cheerful, with murals that looked like they'd been painted in 1987 and never updated. Ethan met her in the lobby, wearing scrubs and his ID badge, looking tired but lighting up when he saw her. Thanks for coming, he said, keeping careful distance. I wasn't sure you would. I don't abandon projects. Right, of course. He gestured toward the elevators. Pediatric wing is on the 4th floor. They rode up in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken things. A code blue announcement crackled over the intercom. Somewhere, a child was crying. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and industrial cleaner, trying to mask sickness with chemicals. The pediatric floor was brighter than the rest, but the branding was a disaster. Faded posters about hand washing, a welcome sign that looked like clip art from 1995. Everything slightly dingy despite obvious efforts at cleanliness. See what I mean? Ethan said. It's trying, but it's depressing. Nora pulled out her phone, started taking photos for reference. The bones are good. The space has potential. It just needs intention. She moved through the hallway, cataloging details. Ethan followed at a respectful distance, answering her questions about budget and timeline and stakeholder approvals. They fell into an easy rhythm, her asking, him answering, both focused on the work rather than the weight of their history. They were discussing paint colors when a small voice interrupted. Mr. Ethan, a girl, maybe 6 years old, barreled down the hallway, dragging an IV pole behind her. She had a bandana tied around her head, colorful, covered in cartoon dinosaurs, and wore pajamas with horses on them. Ethan's entire demeanor softened. He crouched down to her level. Hey, Jade, shouldn't you be resting? I'm bored of resting, she eyed Nora with frank curiosity. Who's that? This is my friend Nora. She's an artist. A designer, Nora corrected automatically, then smiled at the girl. But I do draw sometimes. Can you draw a unicorn? Absolutely. Before she quite knew what was happening, Nora was sitting cross-legged on the hallway floor with a borrowed pen and hospital paperwork, sketching a unicorn while Jade provided very specific directions about horn spirals and mane fluffiness. Ethan watched from nearby, something complicated crossing his face. When the unicorn was complete, Jade hugged the paper to her chest. This is mine forever. Forever, Nora agreed. A nurse called Jade back to her room for medication. The girl waved goodbye, already chattering about showing her unicorn to her mom. Nora stood, brushing off her jeans. Ethan was still watching her with that expression. What? She asked. Nothing, just thank you for being kind to her. Why wouldn't I be? Some people get uncomfortable around sick kids. They don't know how to act. She's just a kid who wanted a unicorn drawing. The sick part is secondary to the kid part. Ethan's smile was soft. Yeah, exactly. They continued the site visit, but something had shifted. The wall between them had lowered fractionally. Not gone, not even close, but cracked enough to let light through. When they finished, Ethan walked her back to the parking garage. The rain had returned, drumming on the concrete ceiling above them. They stopped at her car, neither quite ready to end the interaction. The project looks good, Nora said. I'll have some preliminary concepts by next week. Thank you, really. I know you didn't have to. I wanted to. She surprised herself by meaning it. Can I ask you something? Ethan's voice was careful. Why didn't you just tell me that first day at the cafe, as soon as you recognized me? Nora considered the question, considered lying or deflecting. But maybe he deserved honesty. Because I wanted to see who you'd become first, before the past complicated everything. And who did I become? She looked at him, really looked, at the tired eyes from a 12-hour shift, the way he'd lit up around Jade, the genuine care in his voice when he talked about the kids. Someone better than I expected, she admitted quietly, which makes this harder. It doesn't have to be hard. We could just be friends? She shook her head. I don't think we can just be anything. There's too much history. Then let's deal with the history, really deal with it. Talk about it until there's nothing left unsaid. I don't know if I'm ready for that. When you are, he said, I'll be here. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that 15 years of distance and growth had transformed them both into people who could navigate this minefield. But wanting wasn't the same as trusting. She got in her car. He stepped back, letting her leave. In her rearview mirror, she watched him stand there in the parking garage, hands in his pockets, looking like someone who'd lost something he just started to value. Mara cornered her 3 days later with an ambush disguised as brunch. I know you're avoiding Ethan, Mara said over Belgian waffles and too much coffee. And I know something happened at the party, but I need you both functional for wedding planning because my fiancé is useless at decorative decisions, and you two are my only hopes. Mara, please, it's just centerpieces. You don't have to trauma bond. Just pick some flowers and coexist for 2 hours. Which was how Nora ended up in Mara's living room that Saturday, surrounded by mason jars and eucalyptus stems and spools of ribbon, sitting 3 feet away from Ethan Clarke. They worked in tense silence at first, both hyper-focused on the task. Hot glue guns and wire cutters and the mechanical repetition of assembly. Mara flitted between them, oblivious or pretending to be, chattering about venue logistics and guest list drama. Then her phone rang, wedding planner emergency, and she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Nora and Ethan alone with half-finished centerpieces. The silence stretched, became unbearable. These are nice, Ethan offered, gesturing at a completed arrangement. They're acceptable. High praise from a designer. Despite herself, Nora felt her lips twitch. I saved genuine enthusiasm for work I'm actually proud of. And wedding centerpieces don't make the cut? Wedding centerpieces are pure sentimentality. They exist to look good in photos and then die within a week. Harsh. Realistic. He smiled. A real smile, not the careful ones he'd been offering lately. I miss this. Talking to you. The admission landed between them, vulnerable and honest. Nora focused on wrapping ribbon around a jar, avoiding his eyes. We've barely known each other 3 weeks, she said. Feels longer. It did. That was the problem. Can I tell you something? Ethan asked, setting down his glue gun. About that day, the letter day. Nora's hands stilled. Do I want to hear this? Probably not, but I need to say it. He took a breath. I did try to stop Tyler. After he grabbed the letter from your locker, I told him it wasn't funny, that he should give it back. You did? This was new information. Information that should have mattered 15 years ago. Yeah, in the hallway before lunch. He laughed at me, said I was being soft, that it was just a joke. Ethan's voice was quiet, threading through memory. And I backed down. I chose fitting in over doing the right thing. And then in the cafeteria, when he was reading it aloud, I just stood there, frozen, hating what was happening but too afraid to stop it. Why are you telling me this now? Because you think I didn't care, but I did. I cared, and I was a coward anyway. And that's somehow worse, isn't it? Knowing it was wrong and doing nothing. Nora set down her scissors. Looked at him directly for the first time since sitting down. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the laughter, not even the humiliation. It was the hope. What do you mean? For about 30 seconds before Tyler read the letter, I had hope. I'd done this brave thing, put myself out there, and I thought maybe, just maybe, it would work out. Her voice cracked slightly. And then it all fell apart. And I learned that being brave just got you hurt. Ethan's expression crumbled. Nora, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I know you are. I can see that you are. But sorry doesn't undo it. Doesn't give me back that 30 seconds of hope before everything's shattered. What can I do? Tell me what to do to make this right. I don't know if you can make it right. Some things just are. They sat with that truth. Outside, Portland did its thing. Rain against windows, the distant sound of Max train, the city breathing around them. I'm not asking you to forget it happened, Ethan said finally. or even to forgive me if you can't. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I'm different now, that we're both different. We've been different for a while. That's not the question. Then what is? Whether different is enough. Before he could respond, Mara burst back into the room, phone still in hand, radiating crisis energy. Okay, the floor is canceled, but I found a backup, and we need to make 17 more centerpieces by next Friday. Who's free? Nora and Ethan looked at each other. Something passed between them. Not resolution, but maybe understanding. Maybe the beginning of it. I'm free, Nora said. Me too, Ethan added. Mara beamed. Excellent, see? You two are perfect together. If only it were that simple. They met 4 more times to finish the centerpieces. 4 evenings of shared space and hot glue and gradually lowering walls. They didn't talk about the letter again. Instead, they talked around it, about middle school generally, about growing up in Portland, about the weird alchemy that turned children into adults. On the 5th session, the last one, with all 30 centerpieces completed and stacked in Mara's spare bedroom, Ethan asked the question Nora had been dreading. Can I take you to dinner? We've had coffee multiple times. Not like that, a real dinner, somewhere with tablecloths and wine lists, where we're not designing anything or assembling anything or running into mutual friends. That sounds like a date. It is a date, that's what I'm asking. Nora wound a loose ribbon around her finger, watching it cut off circulation and turn the tip white. I don't know if that's a good idea. Because of the history? Because of everything. She released the ribbon, blood rushing back. What are we doing, Ethan? Really? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels like we're both trying to rewrite something that already has an ending. Or maybe we're writing something new. You're friends with Tyler Moss. That's not new. That's the same as it's always been. His jaw tightened. Tyler and I have history, complicated history. I'm not going to just cut him out because he traumatized someone you're interested in? That's not fair, isn't it? You want me to trust you, to believe you've changed, but you're still loyal to someone who hasn't even acknowledged what he did. Have you asked him to acknowledge it? The question caught her off guard. What? Have you confronted Tyler? Told him who you are and what he did? Why would I do that? Because maybe he doesn't remember. Maybe he was an asshole kid who grew into a decent adult and has no idea he left damage in his wake. Ethan leaned forward. You're angry that I didn't defend you 15 years ago. Fine, I own that. But you're also angry at a version of Tyler that might not exist anymore, and you won't even give him the chance to apologize because you've already decided he doesn't deserve it. You're defending him. I'm trying to be fair to everyone in this situation, including you, including 13-year-old me who made a terrible choice and has regretted it for 15 years. Nora stood abruptly. I need air. We're already different air. She grabbed her coat and walked out onto Mara's balcony. The same balcony from the engagement party, but colder now, November settling into the city's bones. She gripped the railing and breathed the way her therapist had taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The door opened behind her. Ethan's presence, careful and quiet. I'm sorry, he said. That wasn't fair. I'm not trying to defend Tyler. I'm trying to understand what you need from me. I don't know what I need. It was the most honest she'd been with him. I spent 15 years building walls, and you showed up and I started thinking, maybe I could tear some of them down. But every time I do, I remember why I built them in the first place. Because I hurt you. Because you showed me that vulnerability gets punished. He moved closer, not touching but present. What if I showed you differently? What if I proved that vulnerability with me is safe? How? Let me take you to dinner. Let me try. She wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself the way she'd learned to do. But something in his voice, the rawness, the hope, made her pause. One dinner, she heard herself say. But if Tyler's there, I'm leaving. He won't be, I promise. And we talk, really talk, about all of it. Whatever you need. She turned to face him. He looked nervous, hopeful, young in a way that reminded her of the boy he'd been, before complexity and regret had etched themselves into his features. Okay, she said. One dinner. His smile was like sunrise. 13-year-old Nora Morrison spent 2 weeks hiding in the library during lunch. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, pretended not to notice. Just let her sit in the back corner with a book she wasn't reading, staring at pages until the bell rang. Tyler had moved on to other targets by day 3. The cafeteria had found new dramas to dissect. But the damage was done. Nora was that girl who wrote the letter. Every time she walked past a group of students, she wondered if they were laughing at her. On day 15, someone sat down across from her library table. Ethan Clarke, looking uncomfortable and determined in equal measure. "Hi," he said. Nora didn't respond, kept her eyes on her book, The Giver, appropriate given her current feelings about society. "I brought you something." He slid a candy bar across the table. Milky Way Midnight, her favorite, though she'd never told anyone that. "How did you know I like these?" Her voice came out rough from disuse. "I pay attention." She wanted to throw it back at him, wanted to ask why he paid attention to her favorite candy, but not enough to stop his friend from humiliating her. Instead, she just stared at the chocolate. "I'm sorry," Ethan continued. "About Tyler. About the letter. I should have stopped him." "Yeah, you should have." "I know." He looked miserable, guilty in a way that should have made her feel better, but just made everything more complicated. "For what it's worth, I didn't think it was funny, what he did." "But you laughed." "No, I didn't. I stood there, which is maybe worse." Young Nora looked at him properly for the first time since he'd sat down. Really looked. He meant it. The apology was genuine, etched into every line of his face. But she was 13 and hurting, and didn't know what to do with his guilt except reject it. "I don't want your candy," she said, "or your apology. I want you to go away." He'd left the Milky Way Midnight on the table, left her alone in the library with Mrs. Chen in the weight of unprocessed hurt. Nora had thrown the candy bar away on her way out of school, but she'd remembered. All these years later, she'd remembered the gesture and the guilt in his eyes, and the way he'd tried, however inadequately, to make amends. Memory was a strange thing. It preserved hurt and kindness equally, offered both up at inconvenient moments to complicate present feelings. Present-day Nora stood in her apartment, staring at her closet and trying to decide what to wear to dinner with Ethan. First date clothes felt wrong. Professional clothes felt wrong. Everything felt wrong because this entire situation defied categorization. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mara. "Have fun tonight, and please give him a real chance. He's one of the good ones." Another text, this one from Ethan. "Reservation is at 7. I'll pick you up at 6:30? She typed back. "I'll meet you there." Maintaining independence, keeping an exit route, old habits. The restaurant was called Canard, a French-ish place in the Burnside area known for whole roasted birds and natural wine. Intimate without being romantic, nice without being try-hard. Good choice. Ethan was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table, nervous energy visible in the way he kept adjusting his napkin. He dressed up, button-down shirt, no tie, the kind of careful, casual that took effort. He stood when he saw her. "Hi." "Hi." They sat. A server brought water and bread. The ritual of menu reading provided temporary reprieve from conversation, but eventually they ordered duck for 2, a bottle of Pinot Noir, and were left with just each other and the weight of everything unsaid. "So," Ethan started. "So, this is awkward. Very." He laughed, tension breaking slightly. "I had this whole speech planned about how sorry I am and how much I've changed and all the reasons you should give me a chance. But sitting here, looking at you, it all feels insufficient. Most apologies are. Yeah. He took a sip of wine. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me it's none of my business if you want. Okay. Why did you write that letter? To 13-year-old me, I mean. What did you see that made you think I was worth the risk? The question surprised her. No one had ever asked that before. You were kind, she said finally. In small ways, you held the door for people. You helped carry instruments to the band room even though you weren't in band. You were the only person in Tyler's group who didn't actively make fun of the special ed kids. That's a pretty low bar. At 13, kindness is revolutionary. She turned her wine glass, watching light refract through red. I thought if you were kind in small ways, maybe you could be kind in big ways too. And I proved you wrong. You proved that kind isn't the same as brave. The food arrived. They ate in silence for a while, both processing. The duck was good, crispy skin, tender meat, the kind of perfect execution that made silence comfortable rather than awkward. Halfway through the meal, Ethan set down his fork. I'm going to tell Tyler, he said, about the letter, about what it did to you. Don't do that for me. I'm not. I'm doing it because our friendship shouldn't be based on selective memory. If he's really changed, he needs to know what he did. And if he hasn't, Ethan trailed off, then I need to know that too. And if it ends your friendship, then it ends. He met her eyes. I'm not saying you're more important than a 15-year friendship, but accountability is. And I should have held him accountable then. The least I can do is hold him accountable now. Nora's chest tightened. This was what she'd wanted. Someone to choose her side, to validate that what happened mattered. But actually hearing it felt different, heavier. Thank you, she said quietly. They finished dinner, shared a chocolate tart that was too rich and too perfect, talked about easier things, books, music, the relative merits of different Portland neighborhoods. By the time the check came, something had shifted. Not fixed, not even close, but softer. Ethan walked her to her car. The rain had started again because of course it had. Portland's default setting. I'm glad we did this, he said. Me too, I think. Can we do it again? Maybe. Let's see how the Tyler conversation goes first. Fair. They stood in the rain, neither moving toward goodbye. Finally, Ethan reached out and brushed a drop of water from her cheek. The touch was brief, gentle, loaded with everything they weren't saying. Good night, Nora. Good night. She drove home with her thoughts spinning, trying to figure out if she was making progress or just a different kind of mistake. Tyler met Ethan at a sports bar in Northwest Portland, the kind of place with too many TVs and not enough lighting. Neutral territory. They ordered beers and wings and fell into their usual rhythm of trash talk about basketball and complaints about work. But Ethan couldn't focus, couldn't pretend this was just another casual hangout. I need to talk to you about something, he said during a commercial break. Sounds serious. It is, kind of. Ethan took a breath. Do you remember Nora Morrison from middle school? Tyler's face was blank. Morrison. That name sounds familiar? 8th grade, you found her letter in someone's locker. Recognition didn't dawn. Tyler just looked confused. I have no idea what you're talking about, man. The love letter. You read it aloud in the cafeteria. I did? Tyler frowned. I mean, I was a dick in middle school, so probably, but I don't remember that specifically. The casual dismissal made Ethan's jaw clench. It was a big deal. You humiliated her in front of everyone. Okay. Tyler drew out the word, still not getting it. Why are we talking about something that happened 15 years ago? Because I'm dating her. That got Tyler's attention. You're dating someone I bullied in 8th grade? That's weird, dude. What's weird is that you did something that traumatized someone and don't even remember it. Whoa, Tyler held up his hands. I'm not saying I didn't do it. If you say I did, I believe you. But I was 13. We were all assholes at 13. You need to apologize. To someone I don't remember about something I don't remember doing? How does that even work? You figure it out. Because what you did matters, Tyler. It mattered then, and it matters now. Tyler's expression shifted from confused to defensive. Is this your girlfriend putting you up to this? Because it feels like you're picking a fight about ancient history to prove something to her. I'm asking you to take responsibility. For what? Being a stupid kid? We all were. You stood there and did nothing. Should you be apologizing too? The question hit home. Ethan had already apologized, already acknowledged his own failings. But Tyler throwing it back at him felt like deflection. I have apologized. I've been apologizing. That's the difference. Look, I'm sorry if I hurt someone's feelings in middle school, but I can't spend my life atoning for being an idiot teenager. None of us can. You volunteer with Big Brothers Big Sisters, Ethan pressed. You tell those kids about standing up to bullies, but you won't even acknowledge you were one? That's not fair. Isn't it? The conversation devolved from there, voices rising, other patrons glancing over, the bartender giving them warning looks. They didn't resolve anything, just circled around the same points. Tyler's memory gaps, Ethan's accusations, the fundamental disconnect between someone who'd moved on and someone who couldn't. Finally, Tyler threw cash on the table. I need to go. But Ethan, maybe think about why you're really mad. Because this feels like it's about more than some letter from 8th grade. He left. Ethan sat alone with cold wings and warm beer, wondering if Tyler was right. Wondering if this was about Nora or about his own guilt finally finding an external target. His phone buzzed. A text from Nora. How did it go? He stared at the screen for a long time before typing. Not well. I'll call you tomorrow. The next day, Ethan called Nora from his car during lunch break. Told her everything. Tyler's lack of memory, the defensive deflection, the way the conversation had exploded into accusations and justifications. He doesn't remember, Nora said. Her voice was flat, controlled. Of course he doesn't remember. I'm sorry, I really thought. You thought he'd apologize and make it all better. That's not how this works. I know, I don't know what I wanted. Silence stretched between them. Ethan could hear hospital sounds in the background of his end. Announcements, beeping machines, the ambient noise of illness and healing. On her end, quieter. The soft click of her mouse, keyboard typing. She was at work too. The thing is, Nora said finally, I don't think I can do this. His heart dropped. Do what? Us, this. Whatever we're trying to build on top of broken foundations. Nora, please don't. Every time I look at you, I'm going to wonder if you're standing there being silent while I get hurt. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me. I'm not that person anymore. I know, I can see that you're not, but I can't unsee who you were, and I can't unfeel what it felt like to be 13 and humiliated while you watched. So what? That's it? One bad conversation with Tyler, and you're done? It's not about Tyler, her voice cracked. It's about the fact that you're still friends with him, still loyal to someone who can't even be bothered to remember hurting me. What does that say about your priorities? It says I believe people are complicated, that friendship isn't binary, that someone can be wrong about one thing and still be worth knowing. And what if I can't accept that? What if I need you to choose? That's not fair. None of this is fair. The control in her voice shattered. I didn't ask for this. Didn't ask to run into you on some blind date and have all this history resurface. I was fine. I had moved on. And then you showed up and you were kind and thoughtful and everything I wanted when I was 13. And it's just... She stopped, breathing hard. It's just what? Ethan asked quietly. Too late. We're 15 years too late. I don't believe that. You don't have to believe it for it to be true. Another silence, this one heavier, final in a way the others hadn't been. "I need space," Nora said. "Real space, not this half-distance thing we've been doing." "For how long?" "I don't know, maybe indefinitely." The word hit like a physical blow. "Nora, I'm sorry, I really am. You're a good person, Ethan. You've become someone I could have cared about, but I can't separate you from what happened, and I don't think that's going to change. Don't do this, please." "I have to." She hung up, just ended the call mid-conversation, leaving Ethan sitting in his car in the hospital parking garage, staring at his phone like it could provide answers it didn't have. He tried calling back. Voicemail. Texted, "Can we please talk about this?" No response. The next day he tried again. Still nothing. By the third day he understood. She was done. Really done. And there was nothing he could do about it. A week passed, then two. Ethan threw himself into work, picking up extra shifts, volunteering for the most difficult cases. Anything to avoid the quiet moments where he'd think about Nora and how thoroughly he'd failed her. Mara noticed, cornered him in the hospital cafeteria with the intensity of someone who'd reached her limit. "What did you do?" she demanded. "What makes you think I did something?" "Because Nora quit the hospital project, referred me to another designer, and she won't tell me why, which means it's about you." Ethan slumped in his chair. "I didn't do anything, that's the problem." "Explain." He did. The whole story, the letter, the cafeteria, 15 years of guilt and growth. The blind date that wasn't blind for her. Tyler's non-apology. Nora's decision to end things. Mara listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, sympathy, and finally, frustration. "You're both idiots," she said when he finished. "Thanks, very helpful." "I'm serious. She's punishing you for something you did when you were 13. You're flagellating yourself for the same reason, and neither of you is actually dealing with the real problem. Which is that you're scared, both of you. She's scared of being vulnerable again. You're scared of being the person who hurt her. So you're both choosing fear over the possibility that this could actually work. She doesn't want to try. I can't force her." "No, but you can show her that it's worth trying." Mara leaned forward. "Ethan, you're one of the most persistent people I know. You don't give up on patience even when everyone else has. Why are you giving up on this?" "Because it's different." "How?" "Because—" He stopped, tried to articulate something he'd only half understood. "Because maybe she's right. Maybe some things are too broken to fix." "Bullshit. Nothing is unfixable if both people are willing to do the work." Mara stood, gathering her lunch tray. "But you have to actually do the work, not just apologize and hope that's enough. Real work, proving you're worth the risk." She left him with that thought. Ethan sat in the cafeteria for a long time after, watching hospital staff come and go, thinking about broken things and whether they could be repaired or just needed to be mourned and released. His phone buzzed. For a moment his heart leapt, maybe Nora, but it was Tyler. "Hey man, been thinking about our conversation, can we talk?" Ethan stared at the message. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to let that friendship fade the way Nora wanted. But another part, the part that believed in second chances and growth, couldn't quite let go. He typed back, "Yeah, coffee tomorrow?" Sounds good. Maybe Mara was right. Maybe some things were worth fighting for, even when fighting felt impossible. That night, Ethan sat in his apartment with a beer he wasn't drinking and a decision he'd been avoiding. He picked up his phone, opened Nora's contact. He knew she wouldn't answer, hadn't answered any of his calls in 2 weeks. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she needed to hear this without the pressure of having to respond in real time. He hit call, waited through the rings, heard her voice, bright, professional, asking him to leave a message. The beep sounded. His mouth went dry. "Hi, it's me. I know you're not going to call back and that's okay. I need to say some things and I need you to hear them." He took a breath. "You're right, about all of it. I was a coward at 13. I watched you get hurt and did nothing because I was more afraid of losing my friends than I was concerned with doing the right thing. And that's something I have to live with. That's a truth that doesn't go away just because I've spent 15 years trying to be better." He stood, started pacing his small living room, words coming faster now. "But here's the thing. I didn't start volunteering with kids, or choose pediatric nursing, or join anti-bullying initiatives to make myself feel better. I did those things because I see that girl in the cafeteria every time I work with a scared kid. And I see myself, the kid who was too afraid of losing his friends to do the right thing. And I promised myself I'd never be that person again." A police siren wailed past his building. He waited for it to fade. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to know that I remember. I've always remembered. And watching you walk away 2 weeks ago felt exactly like watching Tyler read that letter. Like I was standing there, helpless, while something precious got destroyed. Except this time, I wasn't 13 and terrified. I was just not enough." His voice cracked. He pushed through. "Tyler and I talked yesterday. Really talked. I told him everything. What he did, what it cost you, what it cost me to keep being his friend without addressing it. And for the first time, he actually listened. He wants to apologize. To you. In person, if you're willing. And if you're not, I understand. But I need you to know that I tried. That I'm trying." He stopped pacing, looked out his window at Portland spread below, lights and rain and the river reflecting everything back in wavering mirror image. "I miss you, which is stupid because we barely knew each other. But I miss the person I was becoming around you, the one who could laugh at wedding centerpiece drama and draw unicorns for sick kids and believe that maybe the past didn't have to define everything. I miss the possibility of us." He paused. "One more thing to say. But I also understand if you can't do this. If 13-year-old Nora needs you to protect her by keeping me at a distance. I get it. I do. Just know that if you ever change your mind, I'm here. I'll be here." He ended the call, set the phone down, stared at it like it might ring back immediately. It didn't. Hours later, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, he checked his phone one last time. No call, no text, but his voicemail, the one he just left, showed as saved instead of deleted. She'd listened to it. That had to mean something, didn't it? 2 weeks of silence felt like 2 years. Nora listened to the voicemail 3 times the night Ethan left it, then once more the next morning, standing in her kitchen with coffee going cold in her hand. His voice, raw, honest, breaking in places, carved through her defenses in a way his in-person apologies never had. "I see that girl in the cafeteria every time I work with a scared kid." She'd saved the message. Couldn't bring herself to delete it, but also couldn't bring herself to respond. What would she even say? That she believed him? That she was still too afraid to take the risk? Both were true. Neither felt adequate. Work became her refuge. She threw herself into client projects with obsessive focus, staying late at the studio until the other designers packed up and left. Designed logos and brand identities and website layouts, creating order from chaos, solving problems that had clear solutions. Unlike her actual life. Mara texted daily at first. "How are you? Want to talk? I have wine and no judgment." Then when Nora kept deflecting, "You're allowed to be scared, but don't let fear make your decisions for you." Easy to say, harder to do. On a gray Saturday morning, Nora found herself sorting through old boxes from her storage unit, the ones she'd shoved away when she moved apartments 2 years ago. Yearbooks, old journals, a shoebox full of ticket stubs and concert wristbands, and all the small debris of adolescence. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, she found it. The Milky Way midnight wrapper. Smooth, flat, creased where she'd folded it. preserved for reasons she'd never quite articulated. 13-year-old Nora had thrown away the candy bar, but she'd kept the wrapper. Some part of her had recognized the gesture for what it was. Inadequate, yes, but genuine. An attempt, however clumsy, at making amends. She sat on her apartment floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes and old memories, holding that wrapper, and cried for the first time since Ethan's voicemail. Not angry tears, not hurt tears, just tired tears. The exhausted kind that came from carrying something heavy for too long. Mara's wedding day arrived with unseasonably clear skies. One of those rare November gifts where Portland remembered it could be beautiful. The venue was a garden in Selwood, all twinkle lights and paper lanterns strung between trees whose leaves had turned gold and rust. Nora had considered not coming, had drafted the excuse text 3 times. But Mara was her friend, one of the few who'd stuck around through Nora's worst years of self-imposed isolation. And some things mattered more than personal comfort. She arrived early to help with last-minute setup, telling herself it was about being a good friend and not at all about avoiding the ceremony where she'd have to see Ethan in a suit, standing up as a groomsman. The lie lasted until the processional music started. Nora sat in the 3rd row, wearing a navy dress she'd bought specifically because it didn't require thinking, and watched as the wedding party walked down the aisle in pairs. Bridesmaids in dusty rose, groomsmen in charcoal gray. And there was Ethan, 4th in line, escorting a woman from Mara's med school cohort. He looked devastated, trying to look fine. Smiled at appropriate moments, but his eyes were somewhere else, distant and sad in a way that made Nora's chest ache. He didn't see her. Or maybe he did and was better at pretending than she was. The ceremony was lovely in that way all weddings are lovely. Vows that made people cry, a kiss that made people cheer, the string quartet playing something classical and vaguely familiar. Mara glowed. Her husband looked at her like she'd hung the moon. Nora watched them promise forever to each other and wondered what it felt like to be that certain. To look at someone and know, without hesitation, that they were worth the risk of breaking. At the reception, she claimed a table in the back. Strategic positioning, close enough to be present, far enough to avoid forced conversations. She'd stay through dinner, she decided, make an appearance at the dance floor, leave before the real party started and people got drunk enough to ask invasive questions. The plan worked until the speeches. Ethan stood to give his best man toast, champagne flute catching the light. He looked out at the crowd, found Mara, and smiled. "I've known Mara for 6 years," he started, "and in that time she's tried to set me up with approximately 47 different people." Laughter rippled through the guests. Most of those setups were disasters. There was the woman who collected taxidermied animals, the guy who wouldn't stop talking about cryptocurrency, the very nice person who turned out to be a flat earther. More laughter. Mara was covering her face, shoulders shaking. But through all of it, all the bad dates and awkward coffee shops and terrible conversation, Mara never stopped believing I'd find someone worth knowing. His voice softened. She believes in love the way some people believe in gravity, completely, without question. And watching her marry someone who loves her with that same certainty is one of the greatest privileges of my life. He raised his glass. To Mara and Daniel, may you always be each other's best setup. The room erupted in applause. People clinked glasses and drank and moved on to the next speech. But Nora sat frozen, champagne untouched, staring at Ethan as he sat back down. He'd been talking about Mara, yes, but also about someone else, about believing despite evidence, about finding people worth the inevitable hurt. She knew because she'd been listening for subtext, the way you do when someone's words feel directed at you, even when they're ostensibly about someone else. After the speeches, after dinner, after the first dance, Nora slipped outside to the garden's edge. The party continued inside, music and laughter spilling out through open doors. But out here, under strung lights and November stars, it was quiet enough to think. Beautiful ceremony. She turned. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, careful distance maintained. Yeah, she agreed. Mara looked happy. She is. They both are. He moved closer, not crowding, just present. I didn't know if you'd come. I almost didn't. I'm glad you did. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with everything unsaid. The garden lights made shadows dance across his face, alternating light and dark. Your speech was good, Nora said finally. Thanks, I wrote it 4 times. It showed, in a good way. Another pause. Ethan seemed to be gathering courage for something. Tyler wants to meet with you, he said. To apologize, in person. I told him I'd ask if you were willing. Nora's first instinct was to refuse, but she made herself actually consider it. What would an apology from Tyler Moss accomplish? Would it change anything? Make the past hurt less? I don't know if I want that, she admitted. That's fair. I can tell him no. Did he remember? After you talked to him? Pieces of it, not all the details, but enough to understand what he did and why it mattered. Ethan's voice was careful. He's not the same person he was at 13, but I know that doesn't erase what happened. No, it doesn't. For what it's worth, talking to him changed things. Between us. The friendship looks different now. More honest. Less based on who we were and more on who we are. Nora absorbed this. Did you end the friendship? No, but I made it clear that some things aren't forgivable unless they're acknowledged. And he either needed to do that work or we couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. And he chose to do the work. He's trying. It's messy and uncomfortable, and we had 2 more fights before we got to something that felt real. But yeah, he's trying. The music inside changed to something slower. Through the windows, Nora could see couples moving onto the dance floor, swaying in practiced rhythms. I listened to your voicemail, she said quietly, multiple times. Ethan's expression shifted, hope and fear competing. Yeah? Yeah. She turned to face him fully. I've been thinking about what you said, about seeing that girl in the cafeteria every time you work with scared kids, about trying to be better. And I think I've been doing the same thing, seeing that girl, protecting her. But I've been so focused on making sure she never gets hurt again that I've forgotten she also wanted to be brave. She wrote that letter because she believed in possibility, and I've spent 15 years proving her wrong. You're not proving her wrong, you're protecting yourself. That's different. Is it? Because it feels like I've let what happened make me small, and you're offering me a chance to be big again, and I'm choosing fear. Ethan moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his eyes, could count the freckles across his nose. You don't have to choose anything right now, he said gently. I meant what I said in the voicemail. I'm here. Whenever you're ready, or if you're never ready, that's okay too. What if I'm ready but still terrified? Then you're ready and terrified. Both things can be true. She almost smiled. Almost. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Anything. If 13-year-old you could see us right now, what would he think? Ethan considered this. He'd probably think he didn't deserve the chance, that he'd broken something too thoroughly to ever repair it. And present-day you? Present-day me knows that some things break in ways that make them stronger when they heal. Not the same as before, but not worse, just different. The music inside swelled. Laughter erupted from the dance floor. Mara's voice rose above it all, calling someone's name. I'm not ready for Tyler's apology, Nora said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I think I might be ready for coffee, with you, just to talk. Just to talk, Ethan echoed, and the hope in his voice was cautious but unmistakable. No promises beyond that. I don't need promises. I just need a chance. She nodded. Okay, coffee. This week. This week, he agreed. They stood there in the garden, in the space between past and present, between fear and possibility, not touching, not quite closing the distance, but not walking away either. 3 days later, Nora found an envelope slipped under her apartment door, her name written in careful script, no return address. Inside, a letter, handwritten on actual paper, the kind of artifact that felt anachronistic in an era of texts and emails. She almost didn't read it, almost threw it away unopened, assuming it was from Ethan and not ready for whatever it contained. But curiosity won. The letter wasn't from Ethan. Dear Nora, Ethan gave me your address and said you might not want to hear from me, but that if I was serious about apologizing, I needed to do it properly. So here goes. I'm Tyler Moss. We went to Lincoln together. And apparently I was a complete asshole to you in 8th grade in ways I don't fully remember, but am told were significant and lasting. That's the problem, isn't it? I don't remember. And the fact that I don't remember something that clearly shaped your experience for years tells you everything about who had power in that dynamic. You had to remember, I got to forget. Ethan told me about the letter, about reading it aloud in the cafeteria, about making you a target for mockery. I wish I could say I remember doing it and felt terrible at the time. But the honest truth is, I remember being mean to lots of kids in middle school, and none of it felt important enough to stick, which is probably worse than remembering and not caring. I've spent the past 2 weeks trying to figure out how to apologize for something I don't remember doing to someone I don't remember knowing. And I realize that's exactly the point. The harm I caused was so casual, so thoughtless, that it didn't even register as significant to me. But it registered to you. It shaped your understanding of vulnerability and safety and whether people were worth trusting. I can't undo that. I can't give you back the version of yourself who believed being brave was safe. But I can tell you that I'm sorry. Genuinely, completely sorry. Not because Ethan asked me to be, but because I've spent years working with kids through Big Brothers Big Sisters, trying to teach them about standing up to bullies. And I had to face the fact that I was exactly the kind of person I now tell them to stand up against. You don't owe me forgiveness. You don't owe me anything. But I wanted you to know that what I did mattered, even if I didn't realize it at the time, and that I'm trying to be better. Not to make myself feel better, just to make sure I don't keep being the reason someone else changes their name and learns to be afraid. I'm sorry, Nora. Tyler Moss. P.S. If you ever do want to talk in person, I'm willing, but I understand if you don't. Ethan said you might need the apology to exist without requiring anything from you in return. So here it is, existing, requiring nothing. Nora read the letter 3 times. Each time, different sentences stood out. You had to remember. I got to forget. That one hit hardest. She folded the letter carefully, put it in a drawer with other important documents, passport, birth certificate, the deed to her car, things that proved who she was and where she'd been. Then she picked up her phone and texted Ethan. Thank you for making him do the work. His response came quickly. He did it himself. I just asked him to. Another text. Does this change anything? Nora stared at the question. Did it? Tyler's apology was more thoughtful than she'd expected, more honest, but it didn't erase 15 years of carrying that hurt. What it did do, surprisingly, was release something. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But the tight grip of anger loosened fractionally, made room for other feelings. She typed, Coffee tomorrow? 2 p.m. at Coava? I'll be there, Ethan replied immediately. Nora set down her phone and pulled the Milky Way midnight wrapper from where she'd placed it on her desk after finding it. 15 years old, creased and faded, evidence of an apology that had mattered even when she'd pretended it didn't. Some gestures took a long time to understand. They met at Coava at exactly 2 p.m. Both arrived early, both pretending they hadn't. The cafe was busy with the usual Wednesday afternoon crowd, remote workers claiming tables, students with textbooks. the ambient hum of productivity and caffeine. Different table this time. Not the window seat from their first date. Somewhere in the middle, surrounded by other people's conversations, less isolated. Ethan looked nervous, kept adjusting his coffee cup, lining it up with the grain of the wooden table. "Hi," Nora said, sitting down. "Hi," he smiled, small and uncertain. "Thanks for meeting me. Thanks for the letter. Tyler's letter, I mean. Did it help?" Surprisingly, yes. It didn't fix anything, but it acknowledged things. That matters. They fell into conversation more easily than expected. Safe topics at first: work, weather, Mara's honeymoon plans, 2 weeks in Portugal, way too many wine tours. But gradually the conversation deepened. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after they'd been talking for half an hour. "What did you hope would happen when you wrote that letter? The original one, I mean, to 13-year-old me." Nora considered the question. No one had asked her that before. Not her therapist, not her friends, not even herself, really. "I think I hoped you'd say yes," she said slowly. "That you'd see me, actually see me, not just look past me the way most people did. And I thought if you said yes to the dance, it would mean I was worth seeing." "You were worth seeing. I know that now, but I didn't know it then. And when Tyler read the letter, it confirmed every fear I had about being invisible, about being mockable, about vulnerability being dangerous." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What would you tell 13-year-old Nora if you could go back? That she's braver than she thinks, that writing the letter was the courageous part, that what happened after wasn't her fault. Would you tell her not to write it?" The question surprised her. Would she? Would she undo that moment if she could? "No," she said finally, "because that letter, as disastrous as it was me being authentic, being honest about what I wanted. And even though it ended badly, I think I'd rather have been honest and hurt than safe and invisible." That's remarkably healthy. 15 years of therapy helps. They smiled at each other. Real smiles, not the careful, polite ones. "I have a confession," Ethan said. "After Tyler read your letter, I wanted to say yes, to ask you to the dance anyway. I thought about it for weeks." Nora's heart stuttered. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was 13 and terrified and convinced it would make everything worse, that Tyler would mock you more if I took you, that I'd just be adding fuel to the fire." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. I should have asked. Should have shown you that someone saw you as worth defending, worth choosing, worth all of it. You were a kid. So were you. But you were braver." They sat with that truth. The cafe noise continued around them. The hiss of the espresso machine, someone's laptop playing a podcast, the door chiming as customers came and went. "Do you ever think about who we'd be if it had gone differently?" Nora asked. "If Tyler hadn't found the letter, or if you'd said something in the cafeteria, or if we'd actually gone to that dance?" "Sometimes, but I don't think we'd be here." "What do you mean?" "I think we had to become these versions of ourselves separately before we could be these versions of ourselves together. You had to learn to be brave without me. I had to learn what my silence cost. And maybe now, 15 years later, carrying all this history, maybe now we're actually ready for each other." Nora wanted to believe that, wanted to believe in the narrative arc where pain served a purpose and timing was destiny. Or maybe we're just two people with unresolved trauma trying to rewrite a story that already has an ending, she said. Maybe. Or maybe we're two people writing a new story that just happens to have an old prologue. That's very poetic for a nurse. "I contain multitudes," she almost laughed, almost let herself relax into the warmth building between them. Outside, rain started. Of course it did. This was Portland. Ethan glanced at the window, then back at her. "Can I walk you to your car? Like old times." By which I mean 3 weeks ago, which feels like old times. It really does. They gathered their things, walked out into the rain that had graduated from drizzle to legitimate downpour. Nora had an umbrella this time. Ethan didn't. She hesitated, then offered to share. He ducked under, close enough that their shoulders touched, close enough that she could smell cedar and coffee and rain. Her car was in the same lot as their first date. They walked slowly, neither rushing despite the weather. "I'm going to say something potentially stupid," Ethan said as they reached her car. "That's ominous. I don't want to just be your friend. I know we're figuring things out and taking it slow and all of that is good and necessary. But I need you to know that I'm here because I think you're extraordinary. Because talking to you feels like the most natural thing in the world, even though it's also terrifying. Because I want to know everything about who you are now, not just who you were." The rain drummed on the umbrella. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. "That is potentially stupid," she said. "I know. But also kind of brave. I learn from the best." She looked at him, really looked, at the hope and fear competing in his expression, at the way he was being vulnerable despite every reason to protect himself, at the way he was showing her, through actions and words and presence, that vulnerability with him could be safe. "I'm not ready for a relationship," she said. "Not yet. There's still too much I'm working through." "Okay. But I'm also not ready to walk away." "Also, okay. So what does that leave us?" "Whatever you need it to be. Coffee dates, conversations, slow and careful and honest." He smiled. "I'm a nurse. Patience is literally in the job description." "You're really okay with this? With uncertainty?" "I'd rather have uncertain with you than certain with someone else." The words settled between them, honest and vulnerable, and exactly what she needed to hear. "Okay," she said. "Let's try this, whatever this is." "Whatever this is," he echoed. She got in her car. He closed the door for her, that old-fashioned gesture she'd noticed on their first date, stepped back into the rain, already soaked. As she drove away, she watched him in the rearview mirror. He stood there until she turned the corner, hand raised in a wave. She was smiling, actually smiling. Maybe possibility wasn't such a dangerous thing after all. Over the next month, they fell into a rhythm. Coffee twice a week, lunch occasionally when their schedules aligned, long text conversations about everything and nothing. They talked about middle school, but also about who they were now. Nora told him about her design philosophy, about the clients that frustrated her, and the projects that lit her up. Ethan told her about the kids in the pediatric wing, about the cases that broke his heart, and the small victories that kept him going. They were getting to know each other, really know each other. Not the versions they'd been at 13, but the people they'd become. One evening, sitting in a ramen shop in the Alberta Arts District, Ethan brought up something that had clearly been on his mind. "I've been thinking about the cafeteria," he said, pushing noodles around his bowl. "About my memory of it versus yours." "Okay." "I remembered feeling horrible, wanting to do something but being paralyzed. That's what stuck with me, the paralysis, the shame." He set down his chopsticks. "But I realized recently that I was centering my own feelings in that memory, making it about my guilt instead of your hurt." "That's very therapist of you." "I started seeing someone, after our fight, to work through some things." This surprised her. "Yeah?" "Yeah. Turns out carrying 15 years of guilt isn't super healthy." He smiled wryly. "Who knew?" "What made you decide to go?" "You did. When you said I was still that boy in the cafeteria, just better at hiding it. It made me realize I hadn't actually dealt with any of it, just buried it under good deeds and professional choices." Nora absorbed this. "Is it helping? Therapy?" "It's hard, but yeah, it's helping me understand the difference between making amends and performing redemption." "Which are you doing? With me, I mean." He considered the question seriously. "I hope I'm making amends, but I won't know unless you tell me." She thought about this, about the past month of careful conversations and slow trust building, about the way he showed up consistently, asked before assuming, respected her boundaries without making her feel like a fragile thing. "I think you're making amends," she said quietly. "I think you're being genuine." Relief crossed his features. "That means a lot." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The restaurant hummed around them, the sizzle of the kitchen, other diners laughing, the clink of ceramic bowls. "Can I tell you something?" Nora said. "Something I've never told anyone?" "Of course. After the letter incident, after all of it, I wrote you another letter." She felt heat creep up her neck. "Never sent it. Wrote it in my journal. It was angrier, messier, said all the things I couldn't say in person." "Do you still have it?" "No, burned it when I graduated high school. Symbolic cleansing or whatever." She smiled at the memory. "But I remember parts of it. And one thing I wrote was that I hated you for making me believe in possibility and then destroying it." Ethan winced. "Nora, let me finish." She took a breath. "I've been thinking about that lately, about how I blamed you for destroying possibility. But you didn't destroy it. Tyler did the action. You were just passive. And I made your passivity mean something bigger than it was. It was big. My silence was a choice. It was. But I've spent 15 years punishing you for not being the hero I needed. And that's not fair either. You were just a scared kid trying to survive middle school. I could have been braver. We both could have been." She met his eyes. "I could have confronted you afterward, could have asked why you didn't help, could have given you a chance to explain, but I just disappeared into the library and made assumptions. You were protecting yourself, and you were protecting yourself. Maybe we were both just scared kids making scared choices." Ethan reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. "Can I?" She nodded. His palm settled over hers, warm, solid, real. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a chance to be more than that scared kid. Thank you for seeing me as more than that hurt girl." They sat like that, hands linked across cheap ramen in hard conversations, rewriting the story they'd both been telling themselves for 15 years. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but it was understanding, and maybe that was enough. The Seattle job offer sat on Nora's desk for 3 weeks before she made the call. It was everything she'd said she wanted. Senior designer position at a prestigious firm, 20% pay raise, the chance to work on high-profile clients. 6 months ago, she would have accepted immediately. But 6 months ago, she hadn't been having coffee dates with Ethan Clarke. She picked up the phone, dialed the Seattle recruiter. "Hi, this is Nora Bennett. I wanted to follow up on the offer we discussed." 20 minutes later, it was done. She'd declined, thanked them for the opportunity, listened to their confused questions about why she'd turned down such a perfect fit. "I have roots here," she'd said, "deeper than I realized." After hanging up, she sat at her desk and waited to feel regret. Waited for the panic of having made a huge mistake. Instead, she felt relief. She texted Mara, "Turned down Seattle job." Mara's response was immediate. "Because of Ethan?" "No, because of me. Because running isn't the same as moving forward." "I'm proud of you," Mara wrote. "Also, this means you can keep designing for my husband's dental practice, right?" That was never in question. "You're terrifying when denied." "Damn right I am." Nora smiled at her phone. Then, before she could overthink it, she texted Ethan, "Are you free tomorrow night?" "I can be. What's up?" "I want to cook you dinner. At my place." A pause. She could almost see him staring at his phone, trying to read subtext. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. What time?" 7? "I'll bring wine." The next evening, Nora cleaned her apartment with obsessive attention. Vacuumed corners that hadn't seen light in months. Arranged books on shelves by color. Changed the hand towels in the bathroom 3 times before settling on the blue ones. She was being ridiculous. This was just dinner. Just 2 people eating food together in a private space. Except it wasn't, and they both knew it. At 6:55, her doorbell rang. She checked her reflection one more time. Dark jeans, burgundy sweater, hair down in a way that felt vulnerable, and opened the door. Ethan stood there with flowers, sunflowers, bright and unexpected, and wine, Oregon Pinot, good label, and the nervous energy of someone who also understood what this meant. "Hi," he said. "Hi, come in." He stepped into her space, looked around at the exposed brick walls, the vintage furniture she'd found at estate sales, the design prints framed above her couch. "This is very you," he said. "Is that good or bad?" "Extremely good." He handed her the flowers. "I know you probably have opinions about floral arrangements after the wedding centerpiece trauma. These are perfect." She found a vase, filled it with water. "Sunflowers are underrated." "That's what I thought. Too cheerful for most occasions, but exactly right for some." She arranged the flowers while he opened the wine. They moved around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease. Him finding glasses without asking, her knowing exactly where he'd set the bottle. Dinner was pasta primavera, nothing fancy but made from scratch. They ate at her small dining table, talking about everything except the weight of what this dinner represented. But after the meal, after they'd cleared plates and migrated to the couch with fresh glasses of wine, the conversation shifted. "Can I ask why you invited me over?" Ethan said. "Not that I'm complaining, but it feels significant." "I turned down the Seattle job." His expression flickered. Surprise, hope, careful neutrality. "When?" "Yesterday." "Why?" "Lots of reasons. Better clients here. Roots. Friends." She paused. "You. Nora, you can't make life decisions based on—" "I didn't make it based on you. I made it based on who I want to be. And I want to be someone who stops running from the possibility of being hurt." She set down her wine glass. "I've spent 15 years protecting myself, and it worked. I'm safe. I'm fine. But I'm also lonely and tired of being afraid." Ethan was very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try this. Actually try. Not just coffee dates and careful conversations. I want to see what happens if I let myself be vulnerable with you. And if I hurt you again? Then I'll survive. I survived the first time." She met his eyes. "But I think you're worth the risk." He moved closer, slowly giving her time to pull back. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified, but yeah, I'm sure." "I'm terrified too." "Good, that means we both have something to lose." He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, achingly so. "I don't want to mess this up," he said quietly. "Then don't." Very helpful advice. "I'm full of wisdom." He smiled. Then, carefully, telegraphing every movement, he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft, uncertain, the kind of first kiss that asked questions instead of making statements. When they pulled apart, Nora was smiling. "Okay?" Ethan asked. "Very okay." They stayed on her couch for hours, talking, kissing, existing in the space between past and present, rewriting the story with better endings. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard conversations ahead, still trauma to work through, still Tyler's apology hanging unanswered. But it was possible. And for the first time in 15 years, possible felt like enough. 6 months later, on a rare, sunny April afternoon, Nora found Ethan at Powell's Books. Not by accident. They'd planned to meet here. Neutral ground, public space, the kind of casual Saturday outing that had become their routine. She found him in the fiction section, holding 2 books and looking genuinely conflicted. "Can't decide?" she asked, sliding up beside him. He showed her the covers. Literary drama about family dysfunction, or sci-fi thriller about time travel. "I'm feeling like both, but my TBR pile says I need to choose." "Get both. Live dangerously." "You're a bad influence." "I know." She kissed his cheek. "That's why you like me." They wandered through the store hand in hand, comfortable in the way that came from months of building trust in small increments. They'd had hard conversations, fought about Tyler's continued presence in Ethan's life, less frequent now, but still present. Navigated Nora's bad days when the past felt too close and Ethan's tendency to over-apologize for things that weren't his fault. But they'd also built something real, something that felt nothing like the fantasy 13-year-old Nora had harbored, and everything like what adult Nora actually needed. They ended up at the in-store cafe, sitting in mismatched chairs with overpriced lattes. "I have something for you," Ethan said, pulling an envelope from his bag. Nora eyed it suspiciously. "Is this another apology letter? Because we're past that." "Not an apology, a confession." She opened the envelope. Inside, a letter. This one older, the paper creased and yellowed with time. "Dear Nora," it began, in handwriting that was clearly teenage. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway." Nora looked up at Ethan, confused. "I wrote that the summer after 8th grade," he explained. "After the cafeteria. After you stopped talking to me in the library. I wrote down everything I should have said and didn't." She read on. The letter was raw, 13-year-old Ethan apologizing, explaining his fear, admitting he'd liked her too, but had been too scared to act on it. It ended with, "Someday I hope I'm brave enough to tell you this in person. Someday, I hope you'll believe me." "Why are you giving me this now?" Nora asked, voice thick. "Because you told me about your angry letter that you burned, and I wanted you to know you weren't alone in writing things you couldn't say." He reached across the table, took her hand. "And because I think we're finally brave enough, both of us." She folded the letter carefully. "We are, aren't we? Took us long enough. 15 years. But we got here." She smiled. "Yeah, we did." They sat in the bookstore cafe, holding hands across decades of hurt and healing, and for the first time, neither of them was looking backward, just forward. 3 months later, they were back at Coava. Same cafe, different table, entirely different people. Nora was sketching on a napkin, a logo concept for Ethan's anti-bullying workshop. He watched her work, chin propped on his hand, looking at her the way he'd probably looked at her in 8th grade when she wasn't watching. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "I'm appreciating." "Creep." "You're creep." She smiled despite herself. Unfortunately true. They'd been officially together for 6 months, had navigated holidays with families, had the "what are we" conversation, answered partners or dating seriously, or exclusive and moving towards something permanent, had fought and made up and learned each other's patterns. It wasn't perfect. Nora still had panic attacks sometimes when faced with vulnerability. Ethan still over-apologized and carried too much guilt. They were both in therapy, individual and occasionally couples, working through the ways their past had shaped them. But it was real, and real was better than fantasy. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said. Nora set down her pen. "Good something or bad something?" "Weird something. Tyler asked me to be in his brother's wedding." "And?" I said no. This surprised her. In 6 months, Ethan had gradually distanced himself from Tyler. Not dramatically, not with big confrontations, just prioritizing differently, choosing which friendships deserved his energy. "How'd he take it?" Nora asked. "Better than expected. I think he knew it was coming." Ethan took a sip of coffee. "We talked afterward, really talked, about how our friendship was based on who we were as kids, and maybe that's not a strong enough foundation for who we are now." That must have been hard. It was. But it was also honest, and I think honest is what I need now. Nora reached across the table, linked her fingers with his. "I'm proud of you." "Yeah?" "Yeah, that took courage. I learned from the best." He squeezed her hand. "Speaking of courage, I've been thinking about something." "Ominous." "Maybe." He took a breath. "Move in with me." She blinked. "What?" "Move in with me, or we find a new place together. Whatever feels right. but I want to wake up next to you. I want to fight about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want all the boring, mundane, everyday parts of being together. Ethan, I know it's only been 6 months. I know there's no timeline we're supposed to follow. But I also know that I love you, and I want to build something with you. And I'm tired of pretending that scares me when really it's the only thing that feels certain. Her heart was hammering. You love me? Of first I love you. How is that surprising? I don't know, it just is. She was smiling, couldn't help it. For the record, I love you too. Oh good, that would have been awkward otherwise. She laughed. Actually laughed, bright and real. Can I think about it? The moving in thing? Of course. Take your time. No pressure. Okay, she paused. But for the record, the answer is probably yes. I just need to not make major life decisions in coffee shops. Where do you make major life decisions? Bathtubs. Very dramatic, very Catherine the Great. Noted. I'll ask again when you're in a bathtub. Please don't. That's weird. They dissolved into laughter, the kind that came from being comfortable enough to be ridiculous together. Outside, Portland did its thing. Rain and sun competed for dominance. People walked past with dogs and groceries and their own private dramas. And inside Coava, at a table that wasn't the original table but felt significant anyway, two people who'd found each other across time and trauma and terrible middle school cafeterias held hands and planned futures. 6 months after that, a full year of being together, of learning and growing and choosing each other daily, they were back in the rain. Walking through Waterfront Park, no umbrella, getting absolutely soaked. It was ridiculous and perfect and exactly the kind of thing they did now. Remember our first date? Ethan asked. When I walked you to your car in the rain? You mean when I was terrified and confused and had no idea who you were? That's the one. I remember thinking your laugh sounded familiar, like a ghost. Romantic. It was terrifying. He pulled her closer, both of them drenched, both grinning like idiots. And now? Now it just sounds like you. They'd moved in together 3 months ago, had fought about kitchen organization and bathroom counter space, and whether the living room needed more plants, Nora's position, or fewer plants, Ethan's losing battle. They'd celebrated Nora's 30th birthday with a small dinner party where Mara got drunk and told embarrassing stories. Had spent Christmas with Ethan's family, who'd welcomed her with the kind of warmth that made her cry in the bathroom. They'd built a life, nothing dramatic, just steady and real and occasionally messy, but fundamentally solid. Can I tell you something? Nora said, water dripping from her hair into her eyes. Always. I used to think the cafeteria was the defining moment of my life, that everything after was just dealing with the fallout. And now? Now I think it was just a thing that happened. Painful, yes. Formative, absolutely, but not definitive. She looked up at him. You know what I think about now when I remember 8th grade? What? That girl who wrote the letter. How brave she was. How she believed in possibility despite everything telling her not to. She was brave. She was. And I spent so long being angry at her for getting hurt that I forgot to be proud of her for trying. Ethan stopped walking, turned to face her fully. I'm proud of her, and I'm proud of you. For what? For giving me a chance. For being brave again when you had every reason not to be. For choosing possibility over safety. She kissed him, right there in the rain, in the middle of Waterfront Park, with joggers and tourists and the whole city as witnesses. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Ethan was smiling. What? She asked. I was just thinking about 13-year-old me, the one who was too scared to ask you to the dance. What about him? I think he'd be pretty impressed by 30-year-old me, by us. Yeah? Yeah. He took her hand, started walking again. We did good. We did. They walked through the rain, through the city that had witnessed their worst moments and their healing, hand in hand, and soaking wet and imperfectly happy. Not a fairy tale ending, not revenge or redemption, or any of the tidy narratives they've been trying to write. Just two people who'd learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing not to let the past define everything that came after. And in the end, that choice, made daily, in small moments and big decisions, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.